All praises to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to everyone joining me on this program. This is the Fountain of Israel's Bible Studies program. And as always, it's an honor for me to stand before you on the Lord's holy Sabbath day. Now, this one, I want to deal with the topic of Hanukkah, right? Because, in our Israel community, some people will observe Hanukkah and some will not. So let me just say at the outset that Hanukkah is not found in the Leviticus 23 holy days or feast days, but neither is Purim, which is found in Esther, right? So people go back and forth and they wrestle with the idea of, well, should we do Hanukkah or should we not, right? So what I'm going to say is that Hanukkah is a civil holiday or holy day amongst Israel, a day that they dedicated because the temple was rededicated back to the Most High Yah. So do you have to celebrate or observe it? No, you do not. Is it a sin if you do observe it? No, it is not. Okay, it was okay and sanctioned, by the Most High Yah. And it doesn't have pagan roots. It's not a pagan. Israelites, they were happy that, they got back their religious freedoms, right? We know we're not in religion. It's just the way. But they got back their religious freedoms and they rededicated the temple. But I want to tell you, though, this whole idea of dedicating the temple is not new. In fact, dedicating the temple is in the Old Testament. So we want to look at those type of things, right? And it's really more about observing, or honoring the memorial, right? Honoring what had happened, honoring our history, at least knowing, even if you are one who will not celebrate or observe, the Feast of Dedication or the Festival of Lights, then at least understand what it is and at least understand it and remember what happened at the time or how it came about. So even if you don't want to observe it, that is fine. Guess what? It's okay if you don't want to observe it. But if you do want to observe it, that's okay as well. Why? Because it's not pagan, right? It has no pagan origins. It's not pagan. It's not against the Most High Yah, okay? It's not against the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. So with that, let's just go ahead and learn what this whole thing is, how it came about. But first, we're going to go into the New Testament and look at how the temple is dedicated in the first place, right? And so that word is in there. Hanukkah is in there. It's just in the Hebrew. Hanukkah is the Hebrew word for dedication. So let's take a look at it right here. So go Numbers chapter 7. We're going to go Numbers chapter 7, and I'm going to read 84 and 88. 84 and 88. 84 says, "This was the dedication of the altar in the day when it was anointed by the priests of Israel. 12 chargers of silver, 12 silver bowls, 12 spoons of gold," right? So I'm going to go down a little bit and go to 88. "And all the oxen for the sacrifice of the peace offerings were 20 and 4 bullock, and rams 60, the goats 60, the lambs of the first year 60. This was the dedication of the altar after that it was anointed." Okay, so this was the dedication, and we're going to look at that real quick. Numbers 7. Okay, so let's take a look at that real quick so we can get an understanding, okay? Because the word is in there, Numbers chapter 7. And if I start at 84, and we're going to look at the word dedication in the Hebrew, which is the Hebrew 2598. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's pronounced Hanukkah. Okay, dedication, Hanukkah, same thing. It is Hanukkah, which means dedication or consecration. Okay, initiation, that is consecration, dedication, right? Hanukkah, dedication, same thing, right? The word dedication in the Hebrew is Hanukkah. Okay, so that's all we're talking about here. So we just want to remember that, and then we're going to go back to our scriptures, and we want to go to 2 Chronicles 7 and 9. Okay, we have a lot of information we want to cover. 2 Chronicles chapter, let's see here, 7, and then verse 9. Okay, and then it says, okay, I'm going to start at 8. I did 9, but I'm going to do 8 and 9, right? Chapter 7, 2 Chronicles chapter 7, 8 and 9. Also at the same time, Solomon kept the feast 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great congregation, from the entering of the Hamath unto the river of Egypt. And in the 8th day they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast 7 days. Now, of course, we're talking about the Feast of Tabernacles, right? And we're gonna see that in other books too. Now, this one is talking about the Feast of Tabernacles, but I'm just talking about how they dedicated the temple. Okay, that's all I'm talking about, dedication. I'm not saying right here is the Feast of Hanukkah. No, I'm just saying that dedication is Hanukkah. That's what I'm saying here. So we're talking about the Feast of Tabernacles right here in this particular text. But we're gonna go to 1 King. Let's go back a couple of books. I'm gonna go to 1 King chapter. Let's see, 1 King chapter 8. 1 King chapter 8, and then we want to get verse 63. In verse 63. And it says, and Solomon, or Shlomo, offered a sacrifice of peace offerings, which he offered unto Yah 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of the Lord, or Hanukkah, the house of the Lord. Okay, so I'm just saying it's in there. It's just that it's converted to the English. Okay, it is in there. We're not done. Okay, we're going to go to Haggai. And let's see here. Okay. Chapter 2. Okay. Haggai. Okay, so chapter 2 in Haggai, and we're going to read 10 through 14. Okay? It says, in the 24th day of the 9th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, thus said the Lord, the Yah host, ask now the priest concerning the law, saying, if one bear holy flesh in the skirt of his garment, and with his skirt do touch bread, or pottage, or wine, or oil, or any meats, shall it be holy? And the priest answered and said, no. Then said Haggai, if one that is unclean by a dead body touch any of these, shall it be unclean? And the priest answered and said, it shall be unclean. And then answered Haggai and said, so is this people, and so is this nation before me, said the Lord, and so is every work of their hands, and that that which they offer their unclean. Okay, so over here, and this is talking about, they're talking about they want to do things, for the temple, but then, it is deemed unclean. Okay, so hold on one second. We're going to go over to Ezra. Let's go on over to Ezra real quick. Okay, let's go back right before Nehemiah. So Ezra, we're almost done. Okay, so Ezra Chapter 6. Okay. And that's why we're going to read about, the temple being cleansed when we go into the Apocrypha, right? Temple being cleansed because it was defiled by all these things is what we're talking about in Haggai, right? So we're going to go chapter 6 and read verse 16 and 17. Okay, so when Ezra 6, we're going to do 16 and 17. It said, and the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites, and the rest of the children of captivity, kept the dedication of this house of God with joy. Okay, so they kept the Hanukkah of the house with Yah, and offered at the Hanukkah or dedication of this house of God 100 bullocks, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and for a sin offering for all Yasharal, 12 he-goats according to the number of the tribes of Israel, or Yasharal, or Israel. Okay, so we're looking at dedication over and over and over, right? Dedication, dedication, dedication. Now, we're going to go to the next book. We're going to go to Nehemiah 12. I just want one verse out of there, and then we'll turn to the Apocrypha and really look at where the Feast of Dedication or Feast of Hanukkah comes from, right? But first, we're going to go ahead and go to Nehemiah 12. Nehemiah 12. Now, we're jumping around a little bit because we have a lot of ground to cover, right? So Nehemiah 12 and 27, okay? And this is at the wall, though. And it says, and at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites out of all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to keep the dedication with gladness, both with thanksgivings and with singings, with cymbals and psalteries and with harps, okay? So the dedication, so there's a celebration. It's a big deal to dedicate to the Most High. It's a big deal. It's something they wanted to do, and they did it with gladness. It's more of a symbol that, that Yah is with us, okay? That our Most High Elohim is with us. His presence is with us. We saw when we can see when Solomon, when he dedicated and all that, and the smoke filled the temple and all that, it's just keeping it holy. Now, right now it's defiled. I understand that. Right now it's defiled. But again, we're talking about dedication as a memorial, right? Just remembering that, just a memorial understanding. Okay, there's nothing wrong with knowing our history, knowing what happened, right? So totally fine for us to do that. Now we're going to turn our attentions to First Maccabees. So we're going to go to the Apocrypha. I'll read it for you guys. We're going to go to the Apocrypha, and we're going to go to First Maccabees Chapter 2 and read 25 through 70. First Maccabees Chapter 2. Let's get it. Let me get out of that one. Okay, First Maccabees. I'm using the program so it comes up. Chapter 2, and then we're going to start at 25. Okay, so we're going to start at 25. I'm going to go ahead and read through. I know some of you have the Apocrypha, some of you don't. If you want to follow along with me, that's fine. I'm going to start at verse 25 so we can take a look at this. All right. Also, the king's commissioners, who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at the time, and the altar he pulled down. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of God, like as Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Salam. And Mattathias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, Whosoever is zealous of the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that ever they had in the city. Then many that sought after justice and judgment went down into the wilderness to dwell there. So they went back to regroup, right? Both they and their children and their wives and their cattle, because affliction increased sore upon them. Like it was getting bad in the city, Jerusalem, right? Now, when it was told the king's servants and the host that was at Jerusalem in the city of David, that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were going down into the secret places of the wilderness, so they went into hiding in the wilderness. They pursued after them a great number, and having overtaken them, they camped against them and made war against them on the Sabbath day. And they said unto them, Let that which ye have done hereunto suffice. Come forth and do according to the commandment of the king, and ye shall live. Now, I wonder how did they know when was the Sabbath day? I wonder how these other guys... Oh, okay, never mind. That's another lesson. But... they said, we will not come forth, neither will we do the king's commandment to profane the Sabbath. No, we're not going to fight. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to come out of hiding to go into the city and do what the king says, right? And said, albeit they answered them not, neither cast they a stone at them, nor stopped the places where they laid hid. But said, let us die in all our innocency. Heaven and earth will testify for us that ye put us to death wrongfully. Like you're going to kill us for nothing, for no reason, for no good cause, right? 38. So they rose up against them in battle on the Sabbath, and they slew them with their wives and children and their cattle to the number of 1,000 people. So right there, okay, so a lot of the Israelites, okay, they observed the Sabbath. They knew that seventh day came up, okay, their enemies. That seventh day came up, and they noticed they don't fight back. They didn't do anything, right? Which is how Jerusalem get overtaken by the enemy, right? Because at first they refused to fight on the Sabbath day, all right? Now, when Mattathias and his friends understood hereof, they mourned for them right sore. I mean, they cried and they wept and they wailed because their brethren died, right? And they were trying to keep the Sabbath. They were trying to keep the Sabbath. I mean, more than that, but they were trying to keep the Sabbath, which is how they died, because they did not fight back. 40. And one of them said to another, if we do as our brethren have done, and fight not for our lives and laws against the heathen, they will now quickly root us out of the earth. I mean, they're going to kill all of us if we don't fight back on the Sabbath, right? They're going to kill all of us. And he says, and at that time, therefore, they decreed, saying, whosoever shall come to make battle with us on the Sabbath day, we will fight against them, neither will we die all, as our brethren that were murdered in the secret places, right? So again, and when we go to the New Testament, we see that, the Messiah, we see that Yeshua HaMashiach said it's okay, it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath day, because you're fighting on the Sabbath day to preserve the Sabbath day. Think about that for a second, okay? We're fighting on the Sabbath day to preserve our way of life and to have a rest on the Sabbath day. Now, I understand fighting is not resting, but you are basically sacrificing this particular Sabbath to save it so that we can keep it going forward, right? To keep these heathen and keep the enemies off our back so we can go forward, right? So just keeping that in mind, right? So we can do it then. He said, and then in 2042, then came there unto him a company of Assyrians who were mighty men of Israel, even all such as were voluntarily devoted unto the law. Also, all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them and were a stay unto them. So they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger and wicked men in their wrath. But the rest fled to the heathen for succor. Then Mattathias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars. And what children soever they found within the coast of Israel uncircumcised, those they circumcised valiantly. They pursued also after the proud men, and the work prospered in their hand. So they recovered the law out of the hand of the Gentiles and put out of the hand of kings. Neither suffered they the sinner to triumph, right? So they were winning. They started to win and start turning the tide. Now, when the time drew near that Mattathias should die, he said unto his sons, now hath pride and rebuke gotten strength in the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Now, therefore, my sons, be ye zealous for the law and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers. And then he started giving them, remember, right? Call to remembrance what acts our fathers did in their time. So shall ye receive great honor and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful in temptation, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and was made Lord of Egypt. Phineas, our father, in being zealous and fervent, obtained the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. Jesus, for fulfilling the word, was made a judge in Israel, not the New Testament Jesus. Caleb, for bearing witness before the congregations, received the heritage of the land. David, for being merciful, possessed the throne of an everlasting kingdom. Elias, for being zealous and fervent for the law, was taken up into heaven. Ananias, Azarias, and Mishael, by delivering, were saved out of the flame. Okay, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their Babylonian names. Daniel, for his innocency, was delivered from the mouth of lions. And thus consider ye throughout all ages, that none that put their trust in him shall be overcome. Fear not then the words of a sinful man, for his glory shall be dung and worms. Today he shall be lifted up, and tomorrow he shall not be found, because he is returned into his dust, and his thought is come to nothing. Wherefore, ye, my sons, be valiant and show yourselves men in the behalf of the law, for by it shall ye obtain glory. And behold, I know that your brother Simon is a man of counsel. Give ear unto him always. He shall be a father unto you. As for Judas Maccabeus, he has been mighty and strong, even from his youth up. Let him be your captain and fight the battle of the people. Take also unto you all those that observe the law, and avenge ye the wrong of your people. Recompense fully the heathen, and take heed to the commandments of the law. So he blessed them and was gathered to his father, meaning he died. And he died in the 146th year. And his sons buried him in the sepulchres of his fathers of Modim. And all Israel made great lamentations for him. Okay, so Mattathias, this is when he died. He passed on, and everybody wept and wailed. But they got a few small victories at that time. Okay, so they did get some victories at that time. So Mattathias was going down. Okay, his leadership was going down because he died, and then his son Judas Maccabees was being raised up as the new general, right, to preserve their way of life. Okay, that's the whole thing. They're trying to preserve their way of life and hold back the heathen. Okay, at this time, the Greeks and stuff like that. We're talking about in times of Ptolemy and all that other, and Alexander the Great, all that. We're trying to hold back the heathen. This is a period that's between Malachi and Matthews. Okay, this is the period right in between there, right? So we're gonna go to First Maccabees 4, and start at 5. Okay, we're gonna go to First Maccabees 4. Let's go back there. Okay, First Maccabees 4. So this is what you get when you use a program there. First Maccabees Chapter 4. Let's see here. I'm going to start at verse 5. Okay, now I'm going to read 5 through 59. Okay, now starting at verse 5. I should just get my regular apocrypha, but okay. It says, in the mean season came Gorgias, right? I didn't want to say Georgius, but either way, Gorgias or Georgius. Okay, by night into the camp of Judas. And when he found no men there, he sought them in the mountains. For said he, these fellows flee from us. And he said, they basically said they ran. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their minds. And they saw the camp of the heathen, and that it was strong and well harnessed, and compassed round about with horsemen, and these were experts of war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not their multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. Now, therefore, let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure the Lord will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenants of our father, and destroy this host before our face this day. So that all the heathen may know that there is one who delivereth and saveth Israel. Then the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming over against them. Wherefore they went out of the camp to battle, but they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets. So they joined battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled into the plain. So they got scared, right? Verse 15. Howbeit all of the hindmost of them were slain with the sword. So some of those that were lagging behind, they got killed. For they pursued them unto Gezerah, and unto the plains of Idumea, and Azotus, and Jamnia, so that there were slain of them upon 3,000 men. Okay. This done, Judas returned again with his hosts from pursuing them, and said unto the people, be not greedy of the spoil, insomuch as there is a battle before us. Like, don't take too many, because usually, the spoils of war, you take the silver, the gold, all the precious thing, the weapons, all those type of things, right? But he said, okay, let's not focus on that, because we still got a battle ahead of us, right? Let's not focus on that. Okay. And Georgius and his hosts are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies and overcome them, and after this you may boldly take the spoil. Like, don't worry about that right now. We'll take all that when we're done. We still got work to do. As Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain, who, when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight and were burning the tents for the smoke that was seen, declared what was done. When, therefore, they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, and seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight, they fled every one into the land of strangers. Then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver and blue silk and purple of the sea and great riches. After this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praised the Yah of heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now, all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what had happened, who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him were come to pass. The next year, therefore, following Lysias, gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsura. And Judas met them with 10,000 men. And when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, Blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who didst quell the violence of mighty men by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers into the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and his armor bearer. Shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen. Make them to be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. So they joined battle, and there were slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men, even before them were they slain. Now, when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judah's soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia. I'm sorry. He saw the manliness of Judas and his soldiers. That's just funny. And gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he purposed to come again into Judea. Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary, to cleanse and Hanukkah the sanctuary, right? So they want to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary, okay? So this is them taking back the temple, okay? So we're getting there, but they're taking back the temple, right? Let's see what else they want to do, okay? So he sent the enemies to flight, okay? Lysias and his soldiers, Judas Maccabee and his soldiers, they sent them to flight. He sent them out there, killed a bunch of them, and hey, get up out of here, okay? This is our temple, this is our land, get up out of here, right? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and continue. And okay, so cleanse the sanctuary in 37. He said, Upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went into the Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profane, and the gates burned up, and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest, and in one of the mountains, yea, the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their heads. So they saw that the temple was in disarray. It's desolate. They had, you know how when you don't landscape your yard and stuff like that, it's just growing all wild. Everything was growing out of the temple. And that the priest chambers were torn down, because the Levites are supposed to take care of that. And he says, let me read that again. It says in 38, and when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profane, and the gates burned up, and shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest, or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priest's chambers pulled down. And they rent their clothes, because they were very upset. They rent their clothes and made great lamentations. They're weeping and wailing and howling and crying, and cast ashes upon their head, which is a symbol of, their mourning, right? And fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried towards heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. Okay, this was a big deal. This was a huge deal. You see how they reacted. See, I don't want us to ignore this, right? I want us to know our history. I don't want us to ignore what happened at this time. This is a point in history, right? that happened. And so he appointed some priests blameless in conversation, those who were still zealous for the law, those who were still walking in righteousness, right? And he said to cleanse the temple. So he said in 42, he says, so he chose priests of blameless conversation, their lifestyle, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. So anything that was defiled or unclean, hey, get it out of here, right? And when they had consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which thing, they thought it best to pull it down. Nope, get rid of all that. They redecorated. Let it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Right? Until a prophet was going to show. Okay, because they didn't have a prophet at the time. They had a couple priests. But a prophet and priest, two different things. Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, and made the sanctuary, made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hallowed the courts. Okay, sanctified it, set it apart. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burning offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. And we're going to read about that, about the candlesticks. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now, on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. Right. So this is something that they started doing. Okay. And that's why, Hanukkah is observed in the winter, in our winter. Right. And it's in this December. The Gregorian calendar is observed in December. Right. But of course, this is not Christmas. This is Hanukkah. Okay. This is Hanukkah. And 53. And offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, even in that was it dedicated with songs and cisterns and harps and cymbals. And we're going to look at that again, right? Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the Yah of heaven, who had given them good success. So they got the victory, right? And the Most High did give them victory, because they're outnumbered and all that, and they still got a victory of winning back the temple, right? Okay, delivered and praise, good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They celebrated. And look at what else they did. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates of the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there a great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 5th and 20th day of the month of Caslu, with myrrh and gladness. So this is where we get that feast of dedication, and you're going to keep it for 8 days. Okay. So this gives you the idea of what, of how it went. They decorated. Now they decorate the temple. Some people, try to decorate, their home in memorial, which is, that's fine. Okay. But look at what they did it with. Okay. Decorated with crowns of gold, with shields, and the gates of the temple they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Okay. So things like that. Okay. So let's not go the way of the heathen. Let's not do the whole Christmas thing. Stay away from that. I'm telling you, plain and simple, don't do any of that. However, if you want to keep the dedication of lights, okay, this is the reason. You just read or just listened to why you kept it. And we're not done. We still got a little bit more to read. Okay? But now we have the idea of what happened and how it came to be, right? So we're going to continue. Let me give you some more of this. But we're going to go up to First Maccabees Chapter 5, okay? And we'll just read a little bit of that one, 63 to 68. So First Maccabees Chapter 5, 63 to 68. Okay? Maccabees 5, 63, and we're going to read this, okay? And it says, "Albeit the man Judas and his brethren were greatly renowned in the sight of all Israel and of all the heathen, wheresoever their name was heard of. Insomuch as the people assembled unto them with joyful acclamations. And afterwards went Judas forth with his brethren and fought against the children of Esau in the land toward the south, where he smote Hebron, and the towns thereof, and pulled down the fortress of it, and burned the towers thereof round about. And from thence he removed to go into the land of the Philistines, and passed through Samaria. At that time certain priests, desirous to show their valor, were slain in battle, for that they went out to fight unadvisedly." So some of them, they got ahead of themselves. They didn't do it at the behest or what Judas Maccabee said. They just went out and said, hey, let's go take care of this. And they died. It didn't work. So Judas turned to Azotus in the land of the Philistines. And when he had pulled down their altars and burned their carved images with fire and spoiled their cities, he returned into the land of Judea, right? So this is Judea working, okay, and winning and getting victories, okay, and getting victories. And he was zealous of the law, zealous for his way of life. How zealous are we? I'll admit I can be more zealous. I should be more zealous, right? Now, one of the things, obviously, when you separate yourself, when you come out of her, my people, and you separate yourselves, it's a little bit easier for you to do it. Okay, that's just a quick aside. It's just a little bit easier for you to do it. But when you're steeped and you have the heathen all over you, you have to deal with people that do not serve the Most High Yah, it gets a little bit tough. Okay, it can be done, but it gets a little bit tough. So we're gonna go ahead and move forward. Okay, because we still got some more ground to cover. So now we're gonna go to Second Maccabees. Okay. Second Maccabees, chapter 1, okay? Second Maccabees, chapter 1. So let's check that out. Chapter 1, verse 18. Let's see here. First 18 verses. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at this. All right. And kind of round out the story. And then we're going to look at a little bit of history. He says, "The brethren, the Jews that be at Jerusalem and in the land of Judea, wish unto the brethren, the Jews that are throughout Egypt, health and peace. And Yah be gracious unto you, and remember his covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, his faithful servants, and give you all in heart to serve him and to do his will with a good courage and a willing mind." Okay, this is for us too, right? We need to hear this. "And open your hearts in his law and commandments, and send you peace, and hear your prayers, and be at one with you, and never forsake you in the time of trouble. And now we be here praying for you. What time as Demetrius reigned in the 169th year, he, the Jews, wrote unto you in the extremity of trouble that came upon us in those years, from the time that Jason and his company revolted from the Holy Land and kingdom, and burnt the porch and shed innocent blood. Then we prayed unto the Lord and were heard, and we offered also sacrifices and fine flour and lighted the lamps, okay, and set forth the loaves." We're going to look at that, right? "And now see that ye keep the feast of tabernacles in the month of Cashleu." Okay, so he's telling you to keep the feast of tabernacles there, right? "In the 168th year, and the people that were at Jerusalem and in Judea in the council and Judas sent greeting and health unto Aristobulus, king, Ptolemaeus, master, who was of the stock of the anointed priests, and to the Jews that were in Egypt. Insomuch as Yah had delivered us from great perils, we thank him highly as having been in battle against a king. For he cast them out that fought within the holy city. For when the leader was come into Persia and the armies with him that seemed invisible, they were slain in the temple of Nehemiah by the deceit of Nehemiah's priests. And Antiochus, as though he would marry her, came into the place, and his friends that were with him, to receive money in name of a dowry, which then the priests of Nehemiah had set forth, and he was entered with a small company into the compass of the temple. They shut the temple as soon as Antiochus was come in, and opening a privy door of the roof, they threw stones like thunderbolts and struck down the captain, hewn them in pieces, smote off their heads, and cast them of those that were without. Blessed be our God in all things, who has delivered up the ungodly. Okay, so he's thanking them, right? Now, in 18, therefore, whereas we are now purpose to keep the purification of the temple upon the 25th day of the month of Cashlu, we thought it necessary to certify you thereof, that ye also might keep it, as the Feast of Tabernacles, just like the Feast of Tabernacles, and of the fire, which was given us when Nehemiah offered sacrifice after that he had builded the temple and the altar. Okay, so that's the last part of that. I don't think I have any more of the apocrypha for that. I don't. Right? So you get an idea what had happened. Okay, so they fought back, got the temple, cleansed it, purified it, rededicated it, right? And they remind us, okay, so hey, listen, you keep it, okay? You keep this too, this dedicated, right? Now it's a civil, it's a holy day that Israel set up, not the Most High, but Israel set up. But the Most High seems to be okay with it, okay? And actually gave them a victory, okay? Seems to be okay. Okay, so they took back the temple. In fact, if they didn't take back the temple at this point, then when we get to the New Testament, they wouldn't be at the temple. There would be no temple. It would be defiled, right? Okay, so let's take a look at this. I'm gonna give you an article on the world history, right? There's an article that talks about it, and I want to look at it real quick here. Okay, so nice little article. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's on worldhistory.org, right? We're going to read a couple things. Let's look at what some of these, what was going on at the time, right? Give you a little bit more detail of what was going on at the time. This is about world history. Okay, and it says the Maccabean Revolt of 167 to 160, because remember, time was going backwards, counting down. So, okay, for 7 years, was a Jewish, okay, so every now and then I may say Israelite, because this Jewish stuff, okay, we're not Jewish, okay, you Jew or you're not, okay, was a Jewish or Israelite uprising in Judea against the repression of the Seleucid Empire. The revolt was led by a country priest called Mattathias, and his military followers became known as Maccabees. Successful, Jerusalem was captured and the temple of Jerusalem reconsecrated, and acts still commemorate today in the Jewish Hanukkah festival, right? But we know. Let's just go with it for a second. The Seleucid Empire. After the death of Alexander the Great, his kingdom was divided into four, okay? Egypt, the Seleucid Empire, the kingdom of Pergamon and Macedon, including Greece, and Egypt, governed by Ptolemy the First Soter, allowed for Judaism in Jerusalem to flourish with very little intervening in the 3rd century BCE. However, during the 2nd century BCE, the Seleucid, having gained dominance over Judea, went to enforce a dominion over Egypt and the Jews, or the Israelites. Okay? Now, let's see what happened to the Israelites under the Ptolemaic rule, right? Theocracy and politics were intertwined in the 2nd century BCE in Jerusalem. The social structure of Jerusalem was run by the Jewish aristocracy, such as the priests and the high priest. Although Hellenism, which had spread in the 3rd century BCE after Alexander's conquest, was the dominant culture around Judea, and the Greek way of life pervaded the area. That's why when you get to the New Testament, that's how the New Testament, it's in Greek, okay? And the Romans were beginning to take over, right? The Romans. The Jewish community remained steadfast to their own practices. They largely ignored Hellenism, and under Alexander and the Ptolemies were respected in doing so. The Ptolemies gave the Jewish people, the Jews people, their civil rights, and they lived contently under their rule. The Holy Temple, was the most important structure to the entire Israelite community in Jerusalem. It was the social and religious center of the Israelite people. Not to mention the economic benefits of trading in the temple. More importantly, which all that, we'll get to that later. More importantly, however, it was considered a sign of God's presence amongst them. This feeling of the elect, the chosen ones, was crucial to the Israelite self-conscious, right? Seleucid Takeover, okay? Let's look at that, the Seleucid Takeover. In 198 BCE, all the goodwill of the Jewish community towards the governing body turned to hatred as the Seleucid Empire defeated the Ptolemies. Okay, because remember the 4 generals, and then they start taking more power, right? So the Ptolemies, the Egypt Ptolemies, they start taking over in the Seleucid, empire. Okay, taking control of Judea. So that's why you had that infighting. So they had kind of a civil war, because remember, this is the 4 kingdoms that split after Alexander the Great. Okay. As the Seleucid Empire expanded, okay, they took control of Jerusalem. After the Seleucid Empire expanded, so did their notion of Hellenism. The Seleucids under Antiochus III controlled much of the Arabian Peninsula, forcibly converted many of its new populace to the Greek culture and religion. And the intent in that hegemony continued as they took Jerusalem. Antiochus wanted to Hellenize the Jewish community. Okay, he wanted to change them. They wanted to do the whole Jewish thing, right? The Jewish culture, the heathen culture. Okay, this is how they get Hellenized. His aim was to remove any feature of Judaism that could define it from the Greek religion and other accepted monotheistic religions, because of the benefits of the Greek culture, which included economic integration between all the Greek states and the pressure of regime. Many Jewish people accepted Hellenism. That's how you got a lot of the Israelites, or the Jews in that day from tribe of Judah. That's how you got Judah to really go the Greek way, right? Okay, so you had one that resisted that. Obviously, had the apostles and things like that, and of course Yeshua HaMashiach. They all resisted. You got some that resisted, but those didn't resist. They just went the Hellenistic, way of life, right? They just went that way. Okay, now that doesn't mean that. I don't want to change this to a completely different lesson. I'm gonna try my best not to, but that doesn't mean that obviously the Greeks were taking over, right? So that doesn't mean that everybody. That doesn't mean that because Israel was Hellenized, every Hellenized Jew spoken of in the New Testament is an Israelite who just been Hellenized. That doesn't mean that. Okay, you got to use context. Okay, so we're just gonna continue. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and read a couple things. Let's see here. Okay, so this part is interesting right here, right? This part is interesting in what they did, because they wanted to make sure that you had to give up your Jewish way of life, right? And they found ways. Okay, when you go back into the Apocrypha, and you see how they were trying to force them. They tried to force one of the elders to eat pork. He refused to do it. They tried to force the 7 sons, the lady with the 7 sons, to eat pork and stuff. They wouldn't do it. They tried to find ways to get you to give up your faith, your culture, your way of life, okay, and to break Torah, right? They're sacrificing unclean animals on an altar, all that stuff. They were doing all that stuff. Now look at some of the other things that were being done too. The already strained relationship between the pious Jewish people, and they mean holy, they should say holy, but anyway, the pious Jewish people that did not accept Hellenism and the Seleucid Empire were shattered when Antiochus Epiphanes adopted his father's policy of universal Hellenization, but took it to new heights as Epiphanes looked at Alexander the Great of Macedon and aspired to have his name in the history books alongside him. He needed to distinguish himself above his predecessors. The best way to do that, he thought, was to enforce the Greek culture on all of the Israelite population, a feat that had so far been elusive. He accepted a bribe and approved to take over of Jason of the Oniad family to the now de facto client position of high priesthood. Antiochus used Jason's power as the high priest over the Jewish people to build a gymnasium. Okay, this is where this comes from. Just outside the temple. With that, strengthening the Greek culture in the heartland of the Jewish community. It was a symbol of Greek Hellenism, and having it outside the temple showed the Jewish community exactly who was in charge. The Hellenistic idea of masculinity was shown in the rule that one must be naked to enter the gymnasium. Being naked in public was strictly forbidden under Jewish laws. So any Jewish person or Israelite person that went into the gymnasium violated the laws of the covenant. The state understood this and therefore made it a legal requirement for anybody who could afford it to go at least once. Okay? This was a method of making the state bigger and of greater authority than any other religions other than the Greek polytheism. Thus, many gods. Thus, many Israelite people fell in line and acquiesced to the regime. Antiochus, buoyed by his success of the gymnasium, decided to push harder against the Israelite religion. And short-lived rebellion took place. And when this was put upon Antiochus, views were hardened. He defiled the holy temple, vandalizing it, and erected an idol on the altar. He then outlawed certain practices such as circumcision and the Sabbath. Altars to Greek gods and idols were placed in every town, and those who did not pray to them and convert from practicing Judaism were put to death. Okay, so one of the things is that he wanted them to go naked so he can see that whether or not they were circumcised or not, right? Okay, because obviously in Torah, hey, we need to be circumcised. Okay, and so you see a lot of this Hellenistic influence, and now you start to understand what in the New Testament, what they were trying to fight back against, right? Because there was a time where everything was okay. Hey, as long as they let us practice our religion, that's cool, whatever. Okay, you're above us. We won't resist. Let us practice. Let us worship our God. Let us practice our sacred covenant, right? And that's cool for a while. And then, of course, you get this guy. Okay, he takes over, and then he's like, "No, it's going to be all Hellenized. All y'all going to go the way we want you to go. We are the big dogs. We are the top dogs around here, right?" So that's what they wanted to do, right? So we're moving from this whole Maccabean. We're moving forward, right? We're moving forward. So I'm just to show you a few other little things. Let's see, a couple other things I wanted to just kind of show you guys a little bit. Let's look a little bit at the rebellion, right? Although many of the Jewish community were at this point Hellenized, a lot of them were Hellenized, the persecution of the Jewish people and the destruction of practicing Judaism united the Jewish people in Judea. The Jewish people needed someone to lead them. When Antiochus sent some of his officers to the town of Modium to lay down his tyranny and enact the oppressive laws that he had enforced, he was met by a local Jewish countryman priest named Mattathias. All right, now I read that to you guys. We covered all that. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to skip just a little bit. Okay, and then like I said, Mattathias preached, "Let everyone who is zealous of the law and who stands by the covenant follow me," right? That was in 1 Maccabees 2:27, right? So we're going to go ahead and go down a little bit more. And it says that he had 5 sons, John, Simon, Judah, Eleazar, and Jonathan rallied the Jewish population. And in 167 BCE, the Jewish people rose up with Matthias as their leader. Soon after 167 BC, the family of Matthias became known as the Maccabees, or the Hammer, because the Maccabees means hammer, right? The Hammer. They recruited tough Jewish men or Israelite people on way to begin a guerrilla war as they started to take over the northern villages of Judea. They tore down the altars of idols and killed those who worshiped them, even many Hellenistic Jews. So when you went their way, you want to be with them, you're going to die with them. Mattathias died in 166 BCE, but just before his death, he left Judah in charge of his army, Judah's Maccabee, right? Antiochus underestimated the severity of the rebellion and the size and the strength of the Jewish army. Instead of crushing them with full force of his armies, he set his less effective generals on them. Judah, a wise and courageous military general, defeated them with consummate ease, and Antiochus was made to look foolish. As a response, he set out to exterminate the Israelite population in Judea. Antiochus sent for his most glorified general, Lysias, and around 60,000 Seleucid soldiers to try to do just that. Judah was severely outnumbered. However, the familiarity of Judah was a huge advantage for the Jewish army, or Israelite army, using the slight hills and the superior knowledge of the area. They outmaneuvered the Seleucids, and slowly they picked them off. Finally, they came to battle. Judah had gathered another 7,000 Jewish rebels, but still they were outmanned by at least 5-1. As Judah stood there looking at the masses, so the story goes, he prayed to God for victory. The Jewish people overcame the massive difference in manpower to secure an almost impossible victory over Seleucid Empire and over Antiochus. Okay, so we read that, how he overcame. When Judas came forth, he said, don't worry about that. And then that's when he started telling them, remember, he said, don't worry about the men, don't worry about the army, don't worry about how strong they are, don't worry about their force, their attack, don't worry about that. Remember how the Lord did this, Abraham and Isaac, and Jacob, how he saved Joseph, how he saved Daniel, how he saved Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, all that stuff. He just recounting, right? Recounting all the things that the Most High had done. And then they got a victory. Okay, so we can't say that the Most High wasn't at this time, operating at this time, because they were outnumbered. So many other times we see in the Bible, we see in the Tanakh that they were outnumbered, and yet they still got victory. Okay, so we cannot say he wasn't in here. Okay, so he went ahead and he won that. Now let's see a little bit of the aftermath, a little bit, right? And then we're going to go ahead and come out of this story here. In the aftermath, it said, the Maccabees had accomplished their pursuit of religious liberty and were going after political independence. Although the Jewish people supported their fight against the shackles of religious desegregation, right, they were unsure of the political and cultural influence of the Maccabees. The Hellenistic way of life was already entrenched unto the Jewish people. However, after Maccabees conquered the whole of Judah and enforced the collapse of the Seleucid kingdom in Palestine, the Jewish people, the Israelite people, imposed themselves as an autonomous group. Judea was now free from the Seleucid rule in the death of Antiochus in 129 BCE. Confirm this. The Jewish people, the Israelite people, were now content with the new political purpose of the Maccabees. Although no brother of Judah survived, with Simon being the last leader of the Maccabees, who died in 134 BCE, their intentions still flourish. There's no general consensus on the nature of the revolt. Some see it as an economic and religious civil war. The Hellenized Jews that were propped up with the support of the Seleucids against the zealous, who could only turn to their religion. While others tend to think that it was more than a class victory. It was an example of success in fighting against perceived oppression. No, it was real oppression. The outcome, however, remained the same. The formation of the Hasmonean dynasty, an autonomous Jewish rule over Palestine that would last a generation. The hopes of the Jewish monarchy was relieved. So too was the freedom to practice the Jewish religion. This experience would be vital in the history of the Jewish people, or Israelite people, particularly in the Jerusalem and in the following century. So now let's get to the following century, right? Let's get there, okay? And this is when we're going to get over to a couple things. I want to deal with two things, and then we're going to be out of here. I want to deal first with the menorah. Right? Let's deal with that, because I know people may have a question about the menorah. So let's go to Exodus 25. And we're going to let the Bible speak on that. And the reason why I want to bring this up really is because you have some menorahs, they have like 9 candlesticks, 9 lamps, 9 candlesticks and all that. And again, that's just the real Jewish people putting their own spin on it, right? They're just putting their own spin. Let's see what the Bible says, right? I'm not talking. We don't care what the Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 people are saying. All right. We don't care about the Revelation 2:9, 3:9. We don't care about their opinion. We don't care about what they do. Let's just worry about what thus says Yah. Right. So we're going to do Exodus 25, and I'm going to read 31 to 40. Right. So I'm going to start at 31. Okay. Now let's look at it. And it says, "Thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold, of beaten work, and shall the candlestick be made. His shaft and his branches, his boughs, his knops, and his flowers shall be of the same. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it." Okay, 6 coming out of the sides of it. 3 branches on the candlestick out of the one side, and 3 branches of the candlestick out of the other side. So the parts that come out, those are the branches, right? We're going to look at that. On the other side, 33. 3 bowls made like unto almonds, with a knop and a flower in one branch, and 3 bowls made like almond in the other branch, with a knop and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the candlestick, okay, because there's a candlestick, okay, which means there's a stem and a top right there, and 6 branches will come out of it, okay. And so in the 6 branches that come out of the candlestick, in 34, and in the candlestick shall be 4 bowls unto almonds, with their knobs and their flowers. And there shall be a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches that proceed out of the candlestick. 6 branches that proceed out of the candlestick. Candlestick, 6 branches, right? Okay. Their knop and their branch, in 36. Their knop and their branches shall be of the same. All it shall be one beaten work of pure gold. And thou shalt make the 7 lamps thereof. Now, you see, you get the 7 lamps, 6 branches, but there's going to be 7 lamps, because the candlestick in the middle also has a lamp right there, right? Has the candle right there, has a lamp. Okay? And then it says in 37, "And thou shalt make the 7 lamps thereof, and they shall light the lamps thereof, that they may give light over against it. And the tongs thereof and the snuff dishes thereof shall be of pure gold. Of a talent of pure gold shall he make it with all these vessels. And look that thou make them after this pattern which was showed thee in the mount." Okay, I'm showing you, so you make it like that. So when they go and give you 9 branches and all, ignore that. Okay, ignore that. You've seen what this lamp, how this lamp supposed to be made right here. Okay, you see how this menorah, this candlestick, how it's supposed to be made right here. Okay, 1 candlestick, 6 branches coming out of it, right? But with 7 lights or 7 lamps. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. Now let's go to our last place, which would be, and I just found it interesting, right? So we're gonna go to John 10. Okay, Yochanan 10. Yochanan chapter 10, and let's see where I am. Still in 8. Okay, 10, and I'm just going to read 2 verses, which will be 22 and 23. And he says, and it was at Jerusalem the feast of dedication, and it was winter. And it says what? And Yeshua walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. Now, the reason why I say that, okay, he's observing it, right? He went to Solomon's porch. He's observing it. It's a time of dedication, right? So he's observing it. The one thing we do know about Yeshua HaMashiach, all right, the Christ. The one thing we do know is that if he had a problem with something, he spoke up about it. That's the one thing we know. If he had a problem with something, he spoke up about it. He wouldn't even be there, right? If there's some kind of heathen celebration, he'd be like, man, what are y'all doing? What's going on here? Right? So the cords and whips would have came out again, and he started beating people to come up out of that temple. Okay? So again, if this is something, even if you don't want to celebrate, at least remember it. Okay? At least remember it. At least tell your children. At least tell your family. At least tell them, even if you do nothing. Okay? Maybe you don't want to do nothing. Maybe you don't want to have, which is basically putting candles all over your house and, that kind of thing. And you may have your menorah or what. Cool. But again, I'm not saying you have to do it. Okay? This is not a Leviticus 23 celebration. Okay, this is not a holy day celebration. This is just remembering that, hey, the temple got sacrificed. Now, some people will dismiss it and be like, well, you know, we waiting on the next temple, waiting on the new Jerusalem. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. But again, this is a memorial. We're just remembering that. Okay, so again, I'll end it the way I began. It is not a Leviticus 23 holy day. So it's not a commandment where you have to do it. Just much like Purim found in Esther. You don't have to do it. But the question is, if you do it, is it a sin? Does it violate Yah? Is it bad? No. If you don't do it, is there a problem? No. All I ask is have respect and understand what happened. Have a little respect for what our ancestors had to go through. That's all I'm saying. So, with this, for those who do accept it and want to separate and celebrate it and memorialize it, then happy Feast of Dedication. Happy Hanukkah. For all others, just remember it. Lay it on your heart. Just remember the sacrifice that was made, the wars that was fought, the lives that were lost. So they can dedicate the temple and make it holy unto our God, the Most High Yah of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I hope somebody's been edified by this lesson. So until next time, search the scriptures and prove all things. Shalom, Israel.